Welcome to Resiliency The Podcast. Today's guest is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Western National Property Management, where she oversees the management of over 23,000 multifamily units in California and Nevada, valued at more than $8 billion. Now, guys, that's like more than 20,000 families who this woman is responsible for the team oversight and development and training and property management for. And her firm also manages retail and office and commercial properties on a large scale. Now, more than that, today's guest is also known for her philanthropic efforts. She serves on the board of many organizations, including the nonprofit called Laura's House, which we'll talk about a little bit more in this episode. And she's also been a widely recognized strong leader. She was recognized as a Best Boss of 2024. She was given the Robert A. McNeely Trailblazer Award at her company, and her company, Western National, was named one of the best places to work just this past year in commercial real estate. It's an amazing thing, and I want you as an audience to understand that this is a huge $4 trillion industry that is driven in a lot of ways by a male counterpart. And here we have today a very strong female leader who has really showed us what resilience means. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great Miss Laura Khouri.
Thank you, Jen. I'd like to meet that person you just talked about. Oh my gosh. What an introduction. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, Laura, congratulations on all of the things that you have achieved, all of these phenomenal accomplishments. And thank you for being a trailblazing woman. That's really awesome. That gets us super excited.
Thank you.
Maybe we could start with, what does resiliency mean to you?
Oh boy, my life is nothing but resiliency. As I thought about anticipating this question coming from you today, what I thought about is I can't say it any better than Maya Angelou did. She said that, I can be changed by the events that happen to me, but I refuse to be reduced by them. And I think that's really, for me, what encompasses resiliency. There have been so many different things in my life that have just come at me like a fire hose, right? And you can either wallow in self-pity, or you can pick yourself up and move in a different direction.
That's very, very powerful. The wallow in self-pity or pick yourself up. We talk about that at Resiliency The Podcast, don't we, Jen? We talk about you have to walk through the challenges that are in front of you, because when you come out on the other side, there's something brilliant and more powerful than you might ever have expected it to be. So I think for our listeners, we're pretty curious about that journey that you've been on. So you've gone from what we will call a Gal Friday, and maybe you can explain what that means, to being Western National's President of Property Management. Can you tell us the story of how you got the Gal Friday job and what it took to climb to being president?
So we're going back almost 40 years to the day. I was hired in 1985, April 29th, 1985. And I answered an ad, a 3-line ad in the Orange County Register. Remember, in 1985, there was no internet. There were no cell phones. There wasn't voicemail. If you wanted a job, you went to the classifieds in your local newspaper. And so I answered an ad and I sent my resume in, and I was called in for a 20-minute interview. And a Gal Friday, it's really about how fast can you type? Can you drive a car? Because here at Western, it was about making deposits at the bank, running to the stationery store to pick up stationery supplies, because again, no internet, you can't order things online. It was delivering the mail every day. It was typing on an IBM Selectric typewriter with carbon paper, right? Again, no computers. And the fancy term is gopher. That's really what I was. Go for this, go for that. And so that was the job that I applied for, Gal Friday. Now, having gotten there and being hired 20 minutes into the interview, I literally took a cut in pay to come here. I had had a bunch of office jobs and that sort of a thing. I was 24 years old at the time. And so if you're calculating, you actually now know how old I am. But thinking about the journey, it took me about 18 months to figure out what I needed to do to get ahead. And the reason being is because I was young. I was the type of employee that, hey, it's 4:45. Where are we going for happy hour, right? Where are we all going, right? As opposed to sitting there, finishing whatever project I had in front of me, closing the file and moving on. And so 18 months into my appointment, I finally woke up and like, well, wait, if I actually stayed a little bit longer and got this done, maybe I'll feel better in the morning. It won't be hitting me as I come in the door. Right? And what I didn't realize at the time, and maybe some employees don't realize this, is that you're always being watched. There's someone always watching you, seeing how you're doing, not as if they're spying on you, but they notice. And at that point, I got noticed, and I received my first promotion to office manager about 2 years into this journey. And I got to be honest, worst boss you'd ever want to meet. Worst boss.
Laura, your humility is amazing.
Oh, stop.
But no, it's so true. I had 3 employees, right? And I'm sure they rue the day that they had to report to me. I had no leadership training. So when my receptionist calls me, 8:00 on a Monday morning, and she says, listen, I have a sick daughter. She was a single mom. She had a 6-year-old daughter, and she's got a fever, and I won't be in today. To which I respond to her, find some Tylenol, get a babysitter, and get your butt to work. Oh yeah. I'm not lying. I actually did this. Now, she ultimately forgave me many years down the road. But yeah, worst boss ever.
No, Laura, I love it.
So throughout my career, I have had several people who have crossed my path and wanting to help, or I would see the really good things in them, because the truth be told is, I think in the end, I am an accumulation of all the bad bosses I've ever had, right? And figuring out how I don't want to be, how I don't want people to feel after interacting with me, that their lives are just as important as mine, and doesn't matter what kind of title you have. Right? So having people, step in and say, hey, yeah, you don't want to do it that way. And having people treat me that way, going, ooh, that doesn't feel good. I then became a vice president of operations a few years down the road, probably about 10 years later, and grew in mass, just different departments and people and that sort of a thing. And then I was given an opportunity to run an ancillary division here at Western and make money, so revenue, as opposed to just being office staff support. And in my first year, I brought in $1 million, half of which was all profit for ownership. And so I was, you know what, it wasn't me alone. I had a great team, but something to be said about timing and being in the right place at the right time and knowing the right people that can help. And so I became the president in 2010, so 15 years ago. And I don't think I'm going to go any further in my career. There is the CEO, except that I'm kind of married to that guy, so I don't really want his position. I didn't start that way, but we got married in 2014. So
that's one of the things I love about you, Laura, that I do happen to know that you are married to the CEO, but I feel like it's very important for our listeners. And I always say it to myself. I'm like, that girl climbed from Gal Friday to president long before she married that CEO.
Oh, definitely.
That was a whole different thing. And now it's just love.
Yes.
But I want to know a little more, Laura, because you're such a unique person in that there are very few people who have the ability to go from that type of a real entry level job all the way up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked a little bit about being an accumulation of all the bad bosses that you've had. You were just named a best boss in the last year by a big national publication. What is it taking today, in today's uncertainty, in today's world, what is it taking to be a good and resilient boss today?
It takes active participation. It means that you show up, and you show up in every form, right? We've heard time and time again, it's like, you've got to act the way that you want people to be, right? And, be a good leader and be by example. But it's more than just that. What does that mean? What is the example? The example is when you show up for others, you volunteer for things, and you bring them with you. You're present in the moment, meaning that you're not. I'm sorry. What was that question, Jen? Hang on, just one. You're not on your phone, right? No, you're not on your phone, and you're you're paying attention to them. You're not on your computer when they're in front of you, unless you're researching something together. You are respectful of their lives. You actually know something about them, and what they tell you, you write it down so you can remember to talk about it later, right? You have a work ethic that probably outshines most everyone else, meaning that they don't put in as many hours as you do, but what they do put in, you appreciate. You have humility, and you also have a sense of urgency. I think most importantly, though, being a good leader is when you show up for others. Like, for example, in the bad times, like when there's a death in the family or when there's some sort of horrible accident or illness, that you are there talking to them on the phone, showing up at the hospital, doing what you can to help alleviate whatever stress is going on in their lives. That's how I would describe a good leader.
Laura, I love it too because I see correlations not only in how you treat your team, but also in how you treat your clients when you talk about showing up for others. I know, for example, there were challenges during the pandemic and your company pioneered, I think through you personally, rent relief that helped hundreds of people. Can you speak to that a little bit, to some of these business challenges and how that concept of showing up for others, how do you lead that both in a team and also out to your external client audiences?
So I'm lucky enough to manage a portfolio where half of the buildings that we manage are owned or run by limited partnerships, of which Mike, CEO and husband, is the general partner. The other half of my portfolio are clients. And I think the date was probably March 17th through the 20th, and California is shutting down. And we are in an emergency executive committee meeting, and that there are 6 of us on executive committee, all C-suites. And I don't know what April rents are going to look like, because California is like, now we're shelter in place. What the heck does that mean, right? So I said to them at the time, I said, I don't know what kind of rents we're going to get, and I am responsible for distributions to ownership, making sure that we continue to run our properties, that sort of a thing. And I suggested, what if we offered a discount to our residents who can pay on the 1st? And this is long before these moratoriums on evictions and that sort of thing came into play, before government got involved. And I said, I don't intend to evict anyone on April 1st if they can't pay, but at least I'll get a better feel for how much money we're going to be able to collect in rent so that I can be responsible to our ownership. My team, my executive committee team, agreed. And then the next step was to go to our clients to say, this is what we're doing on the own side of the business, and we do encourage you to do that. Well, what that led to was 3 months of rent relief, because we thought, as everyone else did, that the pandemic was going to end pretty soon, right? We didn't know it was going to go on for years. But after 3 months, we ended up giving away $7 million in rent relief and these 5% discounts to those renters who could, in fact, pay their rent. The other thing, too, and I didn't think about this at the time, is that it just created such a sense of goodwill when, again, I was in president mode thinking, okay, I've got a fiduciary responsibility. I've got to take care of ownership and investors. But in the end, the goodwill that it created through our renters, like, wow, because to my knowledge, there wasn't any other company doing it. So that's really what happened during the pandemic.
I have to say, wow, I work in that industry, just for all of our listeners, I think they know that. I work across the commercial real estate industry. That is very uncommon to see the management company move first. And I think it really speaks to some of what you're talking about in this episode, Laura, to these personal values of outshining. Really, in that case, you guys outshined your competitors. You outshined everyone by really showing up for what other people needed. And I think that that's very clearly a core tenet of your leadership. I know that Dr. Kelly has a couple questions for you, but I want to dig into one place I've always just personally wondered, and so I want to ask. As I look at big decisions that you made, like offering $7 million in rent relief without even having to. I also think about things that I know about your leadership. Again, for our listeners, I've had the chance to know Laura for many years. And one thing I remember learning about her early on was that she wrote an email or a blog post, something personal to her team every single day. That has always blown my mind. And Laura, my question to you, for all of us on here, is that the morning where you wake up and your hair's stuck like this and you just didn't sleep well and everything's not fitting and you just are feeling like a yuckaroo, where do you go? How do you pull that out in an authentic way? That's what I want to know.
Well, when you think about showing up for others, what I talked about earlier, it's not just about you. It doesn't matter how you feel. There are people who rely on you, who look up to you, who need guidance. And even if they don't think they need it, they want it. And that's what happened during the pandemic. And you're right about that. So for 567 days straight, I sent an email company-wide to 1,000 people about either the pandemic or at the time I discovered memes. I had no idea what a meme was before. And then I would theme the memes, right? So there's one time I remember the theme was aisles, as in like grocery aisle, that kind of a thing. It was just a picture of all these empty aisles, including Main Street on Disneyland and a church aisle. And I did a church and a mosque and a temple. And the theme was, I can't wait to walk down these aisles again, right? It was that kind of a thing. And most of it, toward the end, they all just turned into, comedic relief for the team. My husband, though, would not be undone, because when I started sending these daily emails, it started that third week of March. He decided, well, I'm not going to write a blog every day, but I'm going to send some entertainment. And he would send video to the same team that I sent to, right? And so it became the dueling C-suite, right? I'd send an email and he'd send an email to me. And to the point where one day he sent Elton John's "I'm Still Standing." If you haven't seen that video, Elton John is dancing around on a beach in his underwear with a whole bunch of other people in a bunch of Speedos, right? It was just so not HR appropriate. And I clicked on it, and I hadn't sent my email for the day yet. We were actually competing against one another. Who could get theirs out first, right? And I opened that up, and I just went red-faced, because what I didn't tell you is that I've had a 10-year tour of duty in HR during my career here, where I ran HR as a senior vice president. So I'm very sensitive to that, right? And I'm watching Elton just parade around on the beach. And so I immediately went into his office, and I said, we got a problem. Got a problem, hon, right? And he's like, what? Well, he didn't watch the whole video. He just saw the song and, copied the link and sent it off. There was another time, and this is pretty funny, where he misspelled the word shirt and he forgot the R.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. And he was bragging about how he was ironing his own shirts, except without the R. And of course, he never asked. So my response, again, his was the first out of the day, and my response later that day is, you know what? I think our new cuss word will be shirt, because you can say, let's say bullshirt, cow shirt, and every imaginable word.
Bullshirt.
Yes,
I call bullshirt.
I
love
do.
it.
That's a bunch of shirt, right? And so what we created, though, was a sense of community with these emails back and forth in front of 1,000 people, right? And to the point where people would respond, and I would connect with them and ask them for permission to reprint what they had written me. So people saw their name in lights and that sort of a thing. But yes, so long story short, that's the 567 days of emails to the team during the pandemic.
Laura, that's some good shirt right there. Some good shirt. And my comment will be, if anybody has picked up a newspaper or read a headline in a little bit, I think they'll know that corporate workplaces are having problems with retention and stickiness, and so what a wonderful, resilient example of a company that is using levity, that is using, entertainment, but also is so consistent in bringing that kind of stickiness. I think it's very clear that aids in the resilience of the company as a whole. So that's really, really cool. And funny shirt. Also funny shirt.
In both instances that you've talked to us about that, the leading by example around the rent relief and the leading by example in keeping your community engaged, both of those instances are really strong examples of what I would call social capital. So you build that social capital, you build that social reputation, you cement that reputation across the industry, and then that shows people a vision of what they could become. That connects a really strong purpose and a meaning and a value to who you are, how you behave, and it, in many ways, it helps people see the path that they could have a journey like yours, and they see what that path looks like. It's I have a question for you around women being underrepresented in high level leadership positions. And I mean, I want to bring you back to your comment about this phone and not being on the phone. It's really interesting. Last week, Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan put out a notice to all of his C-suite and said, when you come in and you have a meeting with me, don't be on your phone and don't answer your email. I don't care what it is unless someone's dying, because if I'm giving you my time, I expect you to give me your time, because we're not leading by example to the younger generation, and it has to change. And you're doing that too. So I'm really curious to hear, from you. Women do tend to be underrepresented in high-level leadership positions across many industries, whether it's in the United States, whether it's here in Canada, whether it's in Europe. So what's your advice to others who are looking to succeed like you have?
If I have one bit of advice, it's for all women: don't lose your femininity. Don't think that you have to become more manly to do your job, because I think there's a definite divide between men and women and how they react and work with people. Women do bring what I would call the softer side of Sears to the job, to the workplace. But I made that mistake early on when I became the VP of HR. I thought I had to be more masculine. I literally cut all of my hair off. I thought I had to learn how to play golf, and I'm just not a golfer. I tried it, although I do possess a golf record for the most balls lost on a course. But I thought I had to be more manly. I thought I had to watch the games on the weekend. So on the Monday morning meeting where they're all gathered together, that I could speak to who won the football game, And I learned early on that I didn't need to do any of that. It wasn't about becoming a man. It was about bringing the best version of myself that I could, and the best representation of my team that I could to the table. It's also about Khalil Gibran says this. I think I said that wrong. Khalil Gibran, yes. I learned tolerance from the intolerant. I learned how to listen from the talkative. It's about listening and watching and not trying to be the star of the room. I've seen that happen time and again with men, right? You don't have to have the last word. Unfortunately for women, if you get emotional, they'll use it against you. So you really must learn how to control your emotions, even though men get to do whatever they want to sometimes, right? But it is about learning, listening, paying attention, and becoming and presenting your best version of yourself, I think, for women.
I really appreciate what you've just said about not being like a man and not behaving like a man. I have colleagues in Australia, and, women are extraordinarily underrepresented there in leadership positions. And many of my friends who are women who have achieved the heights they have had to behave and act like a man. And they have a really hard, harsh edge. And they become disconnected to 50% of the people in their workplace.
Yes.
It's tough.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I kind of want to stay on this for one more minute, only because within the, we're in this world where gender is a big topic, and what I like is that what you said is it's about bringing the best person. It's really not about whether you act like a woman or act like a man. It's about how to bring your best self to work. Yes. I think I want to ask, before I move into our next topic, just to kind of, I guess, close the loop a little bit on resilient leadership there at Western National. One of the other things I happen to know about you, Laura, is that your team is really well tenured. You have people who've been working there for 20, 30 years. And so I guess I want to ask, in that same realm of advice for our listeners, who many of our listeners are, they are investors, they are business owners, they are change makers, they're trying to lead teams. I wonder, how do we've talked a lot about how you gain that social capital, but then in a more focused sense, when there are people you're working with and you need to help them bring their best to the company, how do you do that? How do you approach that?
How do you exploit their strengths, right? How do you do that? Right? Um, you let them go. You offer up an assignment, you see who takes what portion of it, and you just let them go. You can't micromanage. You can't say, how are you doing? You can say, come back to me when you're ready to talk about it, and I'm happy to guide you, or walk into my office at any time if you need a quick answer, send me a text, whatever the case may be. In my leadership um, is not about following up. My leadership is about letting go. So I let go and I let them go and do what they do best. I mean, I have a team that everyone brings to the table everything that they absolutely can. And they also know that I appreciate them, because at every opportunity, I'm going to do that. I'm going to say something, whether it's a quick email. As a quick example, we have a mystery shop program out on our sites where we have people pretend to be prospective renters, and they come, they call, and that phone call is recorded, and then they show up for an appointment, and they are toured around by our office team. And for any associate who scores over 100 on on both of those together, I get everyone's shop, so I get to see it. And I will just send that person a quick email that just says, what a great job you've done today, Jenn. I'm so proud of you. Wow, 105 and 107. It doesn't get any better than that. Keep it up. And I sign it, Laura. I mean what I say, but I also understand the impact that has on them. It's like somebody's watching and I'm being appreciated, right? And so that's kind of the basis for my team, is that in some special way, particularly here at the corporate office, I will find the time to say, thank you for what you've done, or that was terrific, or acknowledge them in a way that I know that they'll appreciate. A lot of people don't like to be acknowledged in front of an audience. They get embarrassed. And you don't know that initially when you meet them, but you learn that. And so you find the way that works best for them. So.
I love the impact that you're able to make, and it really sounds like it can be done at a macro level and then at a micro level, and it's just kind of that constant focus. And so with that, I want to actually shift the conversation to another area of impact that I know is very strong with you, Laura, and that is philanthropy and giving back. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit, and we're shifting gears here for the audience, but again, Laura is both a business owner, but also a really active member of the Orange County community and gives back to a lot of causes. But I specifically want to ask about Laura's house, which I know is not named after you. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how did you get involved with Laura's house?
Well, Laura's House is a 31-year-old agency, domestic violence agency here in Orange County. And I was asked in 2005 if I would help them with their annual gala. It was their biggest fundraising event of the year. And the reason that came about is I have some friends who were on the board of Laura's House at the time who actually used to work here, and they mentioned me because I used to put on 1,000-person holiday parties. We actually called them Christmas parties in those days, but a full sit-down dinner at the end of the year for all of our associates at the time and their spouses or significant others. And so they said, she knows how to put on a party. Let's get her. And so I went to lunch and I agreed to help. And I walked away and I thought, you know what? I don't know much about Laura's House. I know that it's it's emergency shelter for women and children, and I think I'd like to know a little bit more. And so I called up Margaret Baston, who is the current CEO and was at the time, and I said, "Do you think that I could get a tour of that shelter?" And she said, "Yes, I'm happy to do that." And so I met her, and I had to sign pages of confidentiality documents before I could go there. I mean, I cannot disclose where it is, or anything about it. And I did that, and she drove me there, and I walked over the threshold of the open door, and I was immediately taken back 28 years. It's just the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. When I was 17, I had spent 3 days in a shelter for abused children because I grew up in a domestically violent and alcoholic household. And it was so impactful that I didn't know what to do. I walked my way through the house with Margaret, and you had women and kids and babies and their therapy sessions. And I remember thinking the house was very dilapidated. It seems like people would come in and help. We had an updated bathroom, but yet the kitchen was, from the 1950s sort of thing, right? And we walked out and we got back in her car, and I looked at her and I just started to cry. And she said, "Well, you've passed the test." And I said, "No, I don't think you understand, Margaret. This is me. I've been here. I understand what's going on." It's something that I just buried, right? As a 17-year-old, I just buried it. I moved on. A lot of people don't know this, but I literally left home when I was 17. I am not one of those people who has any type of secondary education. So I never went to college. I used to joke it's school of hard knocks, but the truth is that when I left home, I immediately had to start working. So I supported myself, and I graduated high school, but that was on my own, but that's as far as I got. So when Laura's House approached me and I went through all of that, I said, "I'd love to help." She said, I want to know if you want to be on the board. And I had never done any board work at that point. I just hadn't. But I said, "Sure," right? Because that's what I do. I volunteer for things. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to volunteer. And that's what started my board work, which led to many other boards. But my passion for Laura's House is the fact that as a 17-year-old, I had no place to go but to a home that had a ton of teenagers in it. I was only allowed to stay 3 days because that's all the county could fund. And then I was put back into the custody of my parents for the next 3 months until I ultimately left for good. So.
Laura, I want to say thank you first for sharing that with us, because that can't be easy, And then secondly, I want to say, boy, doesn't life work in such interesting ways, that you experience something so horrific and difficult as domestic violence within your home as a child, and then that you are now able to help those who are going through it. It's pretty amazing. I think the only thing I want to ask here is how could we help? I think that's what I want to know. You're a board director. Some of our audience is in Orange County. What's happening at Laura's House that we need to know about? How can our audience maybe help in that regard?
Well, thank you for that. Love Laura's House. So right as the pandemic was happening, right about 2019, we actually purchased a brand new building, counseling and resource center. And we bought it for $6 million. And it's off the Journey in Aliso Viejo. And we've had this capital campaign going since then because we had to pause like the rest of the world did during the pandemic. And so we were about to finish up our capital campaign, and we're about $4 million away from a $10 million goal. And so there's always that. The other thing that Laura's House does is that there's a DVAC, so domestic violence agency that is, it's the legal side of things. So in Garden Grove, for people who need help with restraining orders, right, that sort of a thing, this volunteer team goes to court with them and also does a lot of things, that relaxation techniques. But imagine you're a beaten woman and you have children, and now you've got to go before a judge requesting a restraining order. You've never done any of this. Maybe you don't even have a job. You don't know what to do, right? But the DVAC, as we call it, is there to help these women and children. And so there's a whole lot going on with Laura's House, not to mention all of the therapy sessions that we offer, personal empowerment programs. And of course, there's the shelter itself. It's a 49-bed shelter. We rebuilt it back in 2010. There's just so much that it offers. The thing about Laura's House and its mission is it's an ugly social disease, and not a lot of people want to talk about that. They don't even want to admit that domestic violence still exists, but the truth is it does. And our job is to put it out of business one of these days. But in the interim, you can always look them up at laurashouse.org. And we take time, talent, and resources for anyone who wants to offer any of those.
I like that, time, talent, and resources. And if, maybe we expand on that a bit more for people who are in Orange County and who are interested in making a donation, and, the capital donation is a bit overwhelming for them and they can't provide support going to court. there are things like, I know some of the things that we look for here are personal toiletries and things that help children and women feel good about themselves, even though they're in a particular spot that they don't want to be. Are there those kinds of, I'm going to say, the softer side of donations that people could make to help someone feel good and confident about themselves as they work through the challenges that they have?
It's a wonderful point, Dr. Kelly. Thank you for reminding me, because we actually do accept all kinds of donations. At Journey in Aliso Viejo, there's a donation center. And part of what makes Laura's House so successful is we have 3 separate resale stores. So people donate their clothes, they donate household items, and those go out to these stores that then we sell. So we've got a cost of goods of $0 yet, and we're able to sell that. But as far as the personal items, yes, they will take anything. Can you imagine the number of diapers that are needed, right? All of the personal type of toiletries and supplies and sundries. Absolutely, they take all of that, and the donation center then basically farms all of those donations out to where they need to go, including the emergency shelter.
So important, so full circle. And Laura, I'm going to ask you one more question before Kelly takes us into the fun part of
Okay.
Resiliency, the podcast, which is the rapid fire. But I have to ask this because we spent an entire episode really focused on your growth and how you impact others. You impact your team, you impact your clients, you impact people through Laura's House, and all of that is so beautiful. I want to ask, as someone who admires your leadership and as someone who sees that and knows what it takes, I want to ask, the last question would be, how do you care for yourself? It's similar to what I asked last time, which was, how do you get through when you're feeling that way? But this time is more, what are those strategies for those people who may be listening, who are trying to lead the way you're leading, who are spread out in a lot of ways, who are saying yes and volunteering? What do you do to protect and guard yourself so that you maintain your own personal resilience?
That's a great question, Jenn. So there are many times that we could work ourselves to the bone, right? And we don't pay attention to that self-care. And that self-care could mean, are we eating the right way? Are we getting enough rest? Are we sleeping the way that we're supposed to? Are we taking enough time away to smell the roses, right? And smelling the roses to many people could be, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to sit in meditation, or I'm going to pray. And it's all of those that we have to remember not to lose sight of, because if you give too much of yourself away, there's nothing left, and you won't be able to give it to yourself or anybody else. So I'm lucky enough to be married to a man who really pays attention to that and can take one look at me and go, okay, it's time to go home. Let's go, right? You've had enough for today, right? But you also have to take the time and remember to exercise, get those endorphins going, right? Because endorphins do so much for you. The other thing too is when you think about, I don't have time to do this right now, or I don't have time to go and eat properly, please make that time, because it won't be available again. It takes a little bit of strategy and thinking, and like, did I bring my lunch today? Yep, it's in my refrigerator right in back of me. It takes a little extra preparation time, but self-care is really important, and it's not selfish at all. Because if you're not good, you're not going to be good for anybody else.
Very wise. Very wise. I think that's just, that's the headline. If you're not good for you, you're not good for anyone else. Yeah. And it's tough. There's all of these things that are coming at us all the time. And I think it's easy to say, all right, I'll just defer that, or I'll defer that, or I'll defer that. And what strikes me as your comment is, you won't get that time back. And you won't. You never will. Yeah.
Yep.
Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Okay, hit me.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Drum roll!
So what's your favorite movie or TV show that makes you feel resilient?
Oh my goodness. Okay, I got a couple. Ted Lasso. Loved Ted Lasso.
Yes.
Yes. But I didn't discover it until, after it went out of syndication. The other thing too is I find myself right now binging on This Is Us. Have you seen that show?
Mhm.
It's been around since 2017. I'm on season 3, but whenever I have an opportunity, I'm going to watch 49 minutes of it because I am watching this family that has all of these things hitting them, but yet they always come back together. Every episode makes me cry, which I also think is a form of self-care for certain people. It's okay to cry and let those emotions out. But yeah, this is us. That's it for me right now.
And what about a favorite song that makes you feel resilient?
Oh, this one's kind of an easy one. So I did a keynote in September, and I chose "Dance the Night Away" by Dua Lipa. Now, what I didn't know is it came from a Barbie movie because I never saw the Barbie movie, right? But um, what what I liked about it is like it's kind of a never let them see you sweat kind of song. It's like, I'm going to smile and I'm going to shine regardless of what's going on, right? Again, that goes to Jenn's question about how do you get up in the morning. It's like you just do it, right? So that's it right now.
You had me there for a second when you said the Dance the Night Away, because Van Halen also has a song called
Yes.
Dance the Night Away. And I thought, and that's one of my favorite all-time songs.
Love that one.
I hear you. I'm a classic 70s classic girl. So yes, I love all of those songs. Yeah.
That's funny. What's the last thing that made you laugh, like really laugh out loud?
Oh, actually, I was at a board meeting with the most recent one here at the beginning of the month, and at the board meeting, what the staff does is it brought us these kind of like a card, right? It was just a card, but it was a card that was drawn by one of the children in the shelter. And on the inside, the volunteers wrote, "Thank you so much," or the children might write in crayon, "Thank you so much." They don't know who they're doing to, right? And my card, that they just randomly put them out in front of every member of the board. My card said, "You're awesome," right? And awesome was spelled incorrectly. It was just the cutest thing, right? And I'd show it to you, but I literally took it home to keep. And so at the end of the meeting, and not many people know this, but Sheriff Don Barnes is on our board. And between Don Barnes and Wayne Pinnell of Haskell and White, the three of us alternate in becoming the chairs of the board every 6 years or so. We just take over from one another, and we do it. And in that meeting, Sheriff showed up a minute late. And he comes in full uniform, with his 4 stars, and he's packing a gun, and, he shows up, right? And when the door opened, I turned and looked at him. I wasn't running the meeting because I'm just the vice chair this year. I looked at him. I said, "Good afternoon." Well, the meeting starts at 7:30 in the morning, right? So, "Good afternoon." He looked at me, made a face, right? And he sat down. And the next thing you know, we're having the meeting, we're going on. And one of the staff members brought him in a cup of tea. And I'm doing this to him in the middle of the meeting, like, okay, what makes you so special here? Now, this is a man. This is Orange County's top cop, right? And I mean, he's got like 4,000, 5,000, people in the department, and I mean, he's a really big deal. But I'm like, in that meeting, we're equal. We're equal. And so he's just kind of making faces at me because I'm just picking on him. That's all I'm doing, right? And everybody's laughing, right? So at the end of the meeting, in answer to your question, the last thing that made me laugh out loud is that we're getting ready to leave. The meeting's been adjourned. And I look up and I was saying, like, "Look at me. I got a 'You're Awesome' card." And Dawn says to me, "Yeah, Laura, we all know you made that for yourself."
Touche.
Touche.
He had it. He'd had enough of that shirt. He was going to come back at
He had
you.
enough of that shirt. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I adore the man. He has the most wonderful wife, Marilyn. But yeah, that was really what made me laugh. I did not see that coming. So.
What's a question you'd like to leave for a future guest?
I think that question would be, describe a time when you weren't resilient. Because I think there's always lessons to be learned from others. So what happened to you that you didn't bounce back, that you behaved in a way that you now think is embarrassing, or you would have done something different? So that would be it.
Great.
Good question. Yeah, that's a good. I want to go answer that one now. That's a really good one. All right. I have a past guest question for you.
Okay.
It's a little similar to one I asked, so feel free to take it however you want, but I think it's a good one.
Mhm.
Laura, how do you balance resiliency with having self-empathy? I know we already talked about
Yeah.
self-care, but how
Yes.
do you balance resiliency with self-empathy?
Yeah. I have a mirror in my office, not because I like to look at myself, because I sometimes hate that, but on the bottom of it, it says, be amazing today. And that's all about amazing grace. Balancing resiliency and self-empathy is remember the grace of who you are, remember the grace of what you bring to others, and helping them become the best versions of themselves. And I think that's kind of really where that falls for me, if that makes any sense at all.
Laura Khouri, it makes wonderful sense. I want to say that you stand as a beautiful example of amazing grace in all of its glory as leadership. And I thank you for encouraging that grace amongst our entire audience. I think everyone at Resiliency, the podcast, and everyone within our community is always seeking to be as resilient as we can. And I think knowing that you can have that grace alongside of it is really a beautiful thing. With that, I want to ask you, Laura, where can our audience find you if they would like to learn more about your graceful and wonderful and all-encompassing leadership? How can they learn more about you or your company?
Okay, well, our company is at wng.com. We also have wnpnapartments.com. I'm on LinkedIn under Laura Khouri. And what else could I tell you? I think that's really how to get a hold of me. I am on Facebook and Instagram, but I don't really participate. I'm more of a watcher, right?
Good
Kind
to
of a
know.
voyeur of what other people do. Um,
So
um,
those who want to connect with Laura can find her on Instagram and send her memes, is what it sounds like.
yeah, there you go.
And I do encourage our audience to follow Laura Khouri on LinkedIn. She is always doing articles speaking about the industry. She's talking about leadership. So I definitely encourage you, find her. It's Laura, Khouri of Western National Property Management. Find her on LinkedIn. She is a beacon of wisdom. How would our audience find Laura's house online if they would like
Oh,
to contribute or donate?
laurashouse.org is where you'll find them. Yes.
Fantastic. So
Thank you.
please visit laurashouse.org if you would like to donate any of those funds or time or anything to help victims of domestic abuse. And then outside of that, I would just like to say thank you. Thank you to Laura Khouri for coming and being a beautiful example of resilient leadership. Thank you, Dr. Kelly Culver. You are always the bestest and greatest co-host. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find Dr. Kelly at theculvergroup.ca. That's .ca because she is the Queen of Canada. You can also find her at Dr. Kelly Culver on Instagram and on LinkedIn. As always, you can find me at Jenn Quader, JENNQUADER on all the socials. You can find my company at thesmartagency.com. And with that, folks, we leave you with grace and resilience. We thank you for being with us. We ask you to please, if you liked what you heard here, and if you're dedicated to resilience in your life, give us a like. Tune in again in a couple weeks. We're going to keep this resiliency conversation going and keep this resilience community building. Thank you all for another great episode of Resiliency, the podcast.